Attention just for a minute, and if you'd all like to come in as close as possible to the podium. My name is Nick O'Donoghue. I'm the Chief Executive of British International Investment. It's great to welcome you all here tonight. As you'll see, we've got no panel. We really hope we're really just here for drinks, and hopefully we will have after this event. I'm going to say a very short, make a very short comment about BII, what we've been doing here at COP. And then Lord Goldsmith, who is our Minister for Commonwealth, Energy, Climate and the Environment, so all the things that are most relevant here this week, will say a few words. And then we're going to have one of our key African partners, Mukwandi, speak, and I will introduce her after Lord Goldsmith has spoken. So again, welcome everybody. This, of course, this COP is the implementation COP, and it's the Africa COP. And as Britain's, as the UK's development finance institution, and particularly because we really are the primary vehicle, the UK government's primary vehicle for delivering climate finance into Africa, really implementation in Africa is really what we do. And for those of you, I know some of you were with us last year in Glasgow, and at the time we made a commitment and a pledge that we would invest 30%, a minimum of 30% of our funding in climate finance. And I'm pleased to say that since that, in the last 12 months, we've been tracking well above that. We've actually committed over $500 million to climate finance. The vast majority of that has gone to Africa, and that takes us to about $1.7 billion that we've committed since 2018. And so that's all important. And I know when you come to events like this, everybody likes to throw around sort of big numbers. But I have to tell you that it's actually not the numbers, the sort of the totals that really I am most proud of when I think of what BII is doing, because we are a development finance institution. So our job is not to do the easy stuff. Our job is to do the difficult things. And in the climate finance world, the difficult things mean really principally going to the difficult countries and the smaller countries, and that's particularly relevant when we talk about Africa, but also the difficult things in terms of technology, being a first mover into new and unproven technologies and helping to develop the technologies that are going to really, we hope, provide solutions to the climate question over the coming decades. And when I look at what we've done over the last year, I see a whole series of different things, of different investments that we've made and companies that we've supported that really are, as I say, doing things that are either in the most difficult places or what the most difficult technologies. And that is, for example, we funded the largest battery storage facility in South Africa. We were with President Sisi yesterday when he announced Africa's largest hydrogen project, which will be launched here in Egypt, to which we will be a key funder. We announced when we were in Chogam in Rwanda an investment in the transmission system in Uganda in new substations. And I must say, we get so much talk when we come to COP about generation, and we get almost no talk about transmission. But when you look at, for example, JET-P in South Africa, what you'll see is the demand for finance and demand for capital for transmission and improving those transmission lines is more important and will take more capital in many places than generation will. So for us as a development finance organization, it's very important for us to be on the front foot. Yesterday, we were with a company called Matito, which is in one of really the very few companies in Africa that's developing public-private partnerships in water. Water is to adaptation finance what power is to mitigation finance. Crucially important, huge amounts of capital required, significant role for the private sector. And so those are the sort of things that we want to be doing. And I'll also mention, particularly because Lord Goldsmith is here, and the last time, and indeed every time that I've met Lord Goldsmith, he has challenged us on biodiversity and forestry. So we were very pleased recently to announce that we were anchoring the first $200 million close of the African Forestry Impact Fund, which will be managed by New Forest. And of course, you know, it's again all very well that we talk about developing renewable power and decarbonizing our economy, but we've also got to find ways of taking carbon out of the atmosphere, and forests are one of the very best ways of doing that. So that is briefly our story on climate finance. We're also here at COP because we want to talk about not just decarbonize or not just sort of mitigation and adaptation, but particularly we want to talk about transition finance, because it's equally important that we as a development finance institution find ways to work with companies that are in really the hardest to abate sectors, providing capital to allow them to reduce their emissions and accelerating that decarbonization within that existing, as I say, hard to abate sectors. And that's really where you often get some very difficult decisions, some very complex decisions. And so one of the initiatives that I'm particularly proud that Amelie, who's here, who's our head of climate policy, has really driven with her team is the work we've been doing on transition finance. And that is, and actually I happened to be at another meeting today with a group of more mainstream financial institutions, and you listen to them, you listen to everybody talking, and very encouragingly talking about their commitment to transition. But when you listen, when you probe, what you find out, they're talking about completely different things often. And so having a clear taxonomy, a way to classify, structure, think about, report, monitor transition finance is going to be incredibly important as we go forward. So we were very pleased to work with many partners, including 91. I don't know if Hendrik is here, but to develop our guide to transition finance. So that's what we've been doing, and I will stop there. I'm going to, as I say, introduce Lord Goldsmith, as I said, Minister of Commonwealth, Energy, Climate and Environment, who's going to say a few words, and then I'll come back and introduce our final speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. I mean, he's right. I am a broken record, and I apologize. And the record will remain broken for as long as I remain in government. And congratulations on getting my title, my job description right. It changes all the time, as the government does. But I'm the political cockroach. They just can't get rid of me. Look, the reason I think it matters, and I'm going to apologize for making this point, but I just think it has to be made over and over again, is that we're here at a climate COP. We're here to tackle the greatest challenge we've ever faced as a species, the defining challenge of our age. But there is no pathway to tackling climate change that does not involve nature. So any net zero plan, company, country, any plan at all that does not include within it a recognition of the importance of nature, the need to restore and protect nature, is just not a credible plan. It's not a plan that's worth the paper it's written on. So this really does matter. I mean, we know that land use is responsible for about 25% of emissions. I'll put it a different way. You remember COP26, just a year ago, and we secured a major package for the world's forests. We got 145 countries representing 91% of the world's forests, committing to halt and reverse deforestation by the end of the decade. And we had all kinds of other commitments around that to support that. $20 billion of finance from governments, but also philanthropists. We had financial institutions worth around 9 trillion committing to align their portfolios with that same aim. We had the biggest commodity traders, the 13 biggest companies committing to align their buying with that same aim. In other words, getting deforestation out of their buying practices. We had the multilateral development banks committing to align their portfolios, not just with Paris, but also with those deforestation goals. So it was a major package around forests. If that promise or those promises are delivered in full, it's a big if, and our job is to make sure they are. But if those promises are delivered, that will represent about 10% of what we need to do in order to tackle climate, in order to stay within 1.5 degrees. And that's just a start. So I say that just to reiterate how important it is that we protect nature to tackle climate change. And it goes so far beyond climate change. And I've just come from a Congo Basin event. You know, if the Congo Basin, and apologies for anyone who was there, you've heard me say this already, but if the Congo Basin were destroyed, that would have the effect of reducing the rainfall across the entire continent of Africa by at least half. Some people think 2/3. And that in turn would destroy agriculture in Africa, across the whole continent. And that in turn would cause a humanitarian crisis on a scale that is almost impossible to imagine. So nature really, really does matter. And the good news is that, well, number one, nature recovers very quickly. So that investment you just described, and others that you'll have been hearing throughout this COP, it really does pay. You know, $1 invested in mangroves pays back $6 in benefits within about 6 years. It's an amazing return on the investment. And it's not just carbon sequestration. Colombia, who played a huge role at COP26, and they're playing again a huge role here at COP27, have got a massive mangrove planting scheme. And they're doing it not because of carbon or because of biodiversity or any of the things that I've just been talking about. They're doing it because they were hit by record storms. And they recognized, they saw that those communities that were situated in areas where the mangroves or the coral reefs were still intact were protected. They were still battered, but they were protected, whereas those communities where the mangroves had gone or the coral reefs had been taken out were totally destroyed. So they're doing it as an act of self-preservation. So nature really, really does matter. And we know there's a huge funding gap, both in terms of climate finance and in terms of nature, even more so with nature finance, if you consider that only about 2% of global climate finance is spent on nature. So I'm really happy about what you just said again. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. It's 2%. So we've got a long, long way to go to close that gap. And it is not going to be closed by public money alone. There's just not enough public money out there. We could quadruple our commitments to nature, and we still would have a huge yawning gap between where we are and where we need to be in terms of financing nature. So BII is massively important. The purpose of BII is to leverage money that otherwise would not flow towards climate change and solving these catastrophic problems in relation to nature degradation. And it is doing so. It is incredibly powerful. There are investments that would not be made if it wasn't for BII, crudely speaking, de-risking those investments, making those investments more attractive and making them possible. And we're going to hear from Kwanda in a few moments from the Zambian bank Zanico, who's going to tell us about the relationship, I hope, between the bank and BII and how BII has enabled Kwanda and her bank to do exactly that, to make investments which I assume otherwise would not have been made. So this is a really big part of the solution. And I'm so happy to hear that not only that you set yourself a target of spending 30% of your investments or targeting 30% of your investments on tackling climate change, but that you're exceeding that. That is really just phenomenal news. Even better is the emphasis you're putting on nature. So thank you so much, Nick, for all that you do. Thank you, everyone here who's involved in BII. It just could not be more important what we're all doing here. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Kwanda. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lord Goldsmith. So I just wanted to formally introduce Mkwandi, who is the Chief Executive of Zanaco, which is Zambia's largest bank. She's been in that position since 2020. We were very pleased. Actually, we were together in Washington 2 weeks ago, and we were very pleased to sign a $50 million facility with Zanaco, which is part of which is focused on climate finance in Zambia. And obviously, being BII, working, we do a lot directly, but working through partners with partners is absolutely fundamental to us being able to deliver finance, again, particularly in some of these most difficult countries. And Mkwandi's been a fantastic partner of ours. She's had a very broad banking background with Standard Chartered and Stanbic. Was the Chief Executive of Access Bank. She was the Chief Executive of the Year in Zambia in 2021. And she also, and I always say this when I introduce Mkwandi, I'm also very proud to say that she was, about 7 or 8 years ago, the then CDC started something called the Africa List, which was a way to try to develop really up-and-coming private sector talent in a number of different countries in Africa. And Mkwandi was one of the very first people to really be part of that network. And I think, as she said before, I hope she'll say again, that was hopefully a very important part of her professional development. And so it's fantastic that she's in the position she is today. So thank you, Mkwandi, for coming. And of course,
Thank you, Nick. Sometimes when I hear people talking about my profile, it's very well set. in line with who we are as Zanaco. Zanaco, being the largest financial services provider in Zambia, has a responsibility to the community. We have the highest deforestation in Africa, in Zambia. We have the third highest in the world. And if we don't do something about it, the globe, future generations, will look back upon us. Part of the conversation was started by the British High Commission, as it happens. They invited a group of female leaders for breakfast last year. And we realized to what extent we can be advocates to change the narrative and to be part of the solution. And so we put together what is called Women's Leaders for Climate Action. And it's a number of female CEOs in Zambia with Sarah Bloom from the British High Commission. And together we agreed we'll each pick up on something that will make a difference. Because I was already in Zanaco, I figured, okay, what can we do? This is well aligned to who we are. And to your point, Honorable Minister, we then identified a few initiatives that were already underway, but that hadn't achieved the traction we required. And one of those was climate finance. And so what we were able to do was to put together a structure for a fund that would deal with the SMEs. And this also speaks to BII, and BII helped us with some of the technical assistance, and now they've actually put their money where their mouths are by offering us a hefty $50 million to support the initiative. Thank you. I'm sure it's not often that you hear the word thank you, especially when it comes to climate financing. So I just thought I'd change that narrative as well, because we need to also acknowledge when we make a few steps, because every journey starts with the first step. And I believe that what BII is doing in Africa is a huge step. And we're looking forward to building on that so that we can also change what's happening in Zambia from the perspective of the deforestation, from the perspective of the livelihoods and the community, so that we stop what is negative, we start doing more of what is positive, and we continue what's already working. So it's a great privilege for me to represent not just Zanaco, but the entire African continent. We believe that with this COP27, which is an African COP, this is an opportunity for us to reset and identify how can we build on the foundation that has already been set, and how can we, jointly with BII, identify those opportunities to then address the issues on the ground. Zanaco is a homegrown bank. We're on the ground and we're seeing the impact of climate change. We see it every day. The farmers on the ground when the rain is late. We've only just started seeing the rainy season now, and before it used to come September, October. Now it's November, December. We can see that impact. Extreme temperatures, we can see that impact. Food shortages in certain areas, issues that you have never seen before, floods. We can actually see that impact. And we're saying we need to start somewhere with a structure that will actually work. And so jointly with BII, what we have identified is that the SME space, the climate space, and the gender space is our priority. And what we have decided to do as we finalize our structures is to identify how we can make that difference going forward. I'm looking forward to building on this partnership jointly with BII. And I'm also looking forward to just making a difference in terms of making people aware of the impact of what we do every day. Because sometimes we forget that it makes a difference, whatever it is that we're doing. We need to have that personal leadership, and we need to drive it to deliver to this agenda. Agriculture in particular is an important economic space that we're playing in as Zanaco, and we believe that we're in a very strong position to impact agriculture in a very positive way. We realize that just conservation agriculture in and of itself would be a great opportunity, and we've started looking for opportunities to actually drive that investment, because we're vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and we believe that with the facility that we're likely to conclude in the near future, we will be able to drive this initiative. I'd like to close by emphasizing that we have to make a difference in our communities. Green financing and various initiatives on the ground are what are going to get us there. There is no way that we can exclude the access to finance issue on the agenda. And as a local financial services provider, it starts with us. We have actually set aside funds to actually put into the kitty and make sure that on the ground the financing is available. We recognize that the governance structures need to be enhanced, and that's part of the story as well that we've had with BII, where they've actually identified some of our policy issues that needed addressing, some of the areas of concern that needed addressing, because we're learning together. It's a journey, and as we keep going, we believe that we'll be able to achieve the change that we're looking for. So overall, ladies and gentlemen, this is a thank you statement. This is an optimistic statement to say we believe that jointly we can make a difference. It's the right thing to do for our businesses. It's the right thing to do for our communities. It's the right thing to do for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let me just end by first of all thanking Lord Goldsmith. You know, the UK government and the UK taxpayer have supported what was CDC, now BII, for 74 years, and we take that responsibility. We don't take that support for granted, and we look. It's an enormous responsibility, and if we're going to dispatch that responsibility, we have to find people like Mukwandi. We have to partner with them, and nobody brings to life, I think, the issues and the challenges of Africa and Zambia, and particularly climate change in Africa in the way that you do. So again, many thanks. It's a privilege for us to be in partnership with you, and we hope it'll last for many more years. And so thank you all for coming. We will now move on to the drinks phase of this event, which should hopefully be right outside. Thank you.